For most of human history, time had no number. Not minutes. Not hours. Not in a word for 10 past 5. And yet your ancestors were never late. They woke up. They hunted. They gathered. They returned home before dark. They timed births, migrations, and ceremonies with shocking precision, all without a single tick of a clock. So how did they actually do it? Not by guessing. Not by luck. By reading a world that we, frankly, have forgotten how to see. Here's the better question. If you stripped away every clock, every phone, every glowing screen in your life, could you survive a single day on time? Because for hundreds of thousands of years, that was the default human condition. Imagine you're an early human, 50,000 years ago, lying under a sky that has never seen electric light. You don't open your eyes to an alarm. You open them because the air just shifted. The temperature drops slightly before dawn, and your body feels it before your brain does. Birds begin their pre-dawn chorus in a strict, predictable order. A specific species sings first, then another, then another. Modern ornithologists actually call this the dawn chorus, and the sequence is so reliable you could set a watch by it. Your ancestors basically did. That was their alarm clock, a feathered, organic, hyper-local one, tuned to their valley. Now think about that for a second. Before humans built any tool to measure time, the planet itself was already a clock with 1,000 moving parts. The trick was learning to read it. And early humans were astonishingly good readers. The sun, of course, was the headline act. But they didn't just glance up and shrug. They tracked the angle of shadows the way you check your phone. A long shadow stretching west meant morning. A shadow pulled directly under your feet meant midday and the hottest, most dangerous part of the day. A long shadow leaning east meant time to start heading back to camp. In open savanna landscapes, this wasn't poetic. It was survival. Misjudge the sun by an hour and you were walking home in the dark in a world full of predators that could see better than you could. So the body adapted. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hadza in Tanzania, have found their daily rhythms still snap tightly to sunrise and sunset. Their internal clocks, free of artificial light, run cleaner and more synchronized than ours. In other words, your ancestors weren't checking the time. They were the time. What the sun only tells you about today. What about next week? Next season? The right moment to follow a herd or harvest a fruit that ripens for only 10 days a year? For that, early humans looked up at night. And here is where things get genuinely beautiful. The moon was the first true calendar. It cycles roughly every 29.5 days, visible to anyone with eyes and patience. Archaeologists have found bones, antlers, and stones from tens of thousands of years ago carved with rows of tiny notches. Some of those notches appear to track lunar phases. A famous example is the Ishango bone from Central Africa, etched with sequences that many researchers believe reflect lunar counting, though the exact meaning is still debated. Whether or not every notch is a moon, the pattern is clear. Humans were marking time on objects long before they were writing words. That is staggering when you sit with it. Before language was even fully written, our ancestors were already carving the sky into something portable. Imagine being the first person in your group to realize that the bright disk above repeats itself. Dead nights are not random. They have a rhythm. You could now predict darkness. You could now plan. You had just invented the future. The stars added another layer entirely. Different constellations rise and set at different times of year. In the northern hemisphere, the appearance of certain star clusters signaled the cold months. In equatorial regions, the rising of specific stars before dawn predicted the rainy season. Across cultures, people noticed the same trick. The sky changes with the seasons in a way you can memorize. Ancient humans likely passed these patterns down through stories. A myth about a hunter chasing a bear across the night sky wasn't just entertainment. It was a database. It was how a grandmother taught a child to know when winter was coming without ever using the word October. Picture that fireside lesson. A small child wrapped in fur, eyes wide. An elder pointing upward, tracing a shape with a worn finger. Telling a story that was secretly a clock, a calendar, and a survival manual all at once. This is the part most documentaries skip. Ancient timekeeping wasn't a single tool. It was a layered, interlocking system stitched into stories, songs, and the body itself. Speaking of the body, let's talk about a clock you're carrying right now. Hunger. Thirst. The strange afternoon dip in energy. The wave of sleepiness that hits when the light turns gold. These aren't bugs. They're features. Ancient timing signals refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Your circadian rhythm is essentially a biological wristwatch, and ours run on roughly a 24-hour cycle, even in total darkness. For ancient humans, this internal clock was the baseline and the sky was the correction. They sinned one against the other every single day. Quick pause. I'm genuinely curious about something, and I want your honest answer in the comments. If you had to live one full day with no phone, no clock, no watch, could you guess the time within 30 minutes by feel alone? Try it sometime and tell me how badly you failed, or how surprisingly close you got. Because most modern people are stunned at how time-blind they become. Now back to the clocks our ancestors actually used. Beyond the sun, moon, and stars, early humans read landscapes the way you read text messages. Flowers opening and closing in specific hours. The way a certain tree releases pollen only in the early morning. The smell of rain before a storm. The behavior of insects at dusk. Migrating birds arriving like clockwork in the same week each year. Tides pulling back at predictable intervals along the coast. Salmon returning to rivers on schedules so reliable that entire cultures organize their year around them. This is the strange genius of the prehistoric mind. It wasn't measuring time abstractly. It was reading time off everything at once. The world was a giant, breathing, blooming dashboard, and humans were the only species smart enough to read all the dials. Then, eventually, we started to cheat. Somewhere between 10 and 5,000 years ago, as farming spread, humans began building tools to make time portable. Shadow sticks, a simple upright pole, became the earliest sundials. The Egyptians refined them. Water clocks dripped through tiny holes measuring hours by volume. In Stonehenge and similar megalithic sites across Europe, massive stones were aligned to catch the rising sun on the longest and shortest days of the year. These weren't just temples. They were enormous, permanent calendars built into the earth. Imagine the labor. Imagine dragging multi-ton stones across miles of terrain to mark a sunrise that happens once a year. That's how badly humans wanted to pin time down. And here's the thing. Most scholars believe these monuments weren't built for daily timekeeping. They were built for ritual, for festivals, for synchronizing entire communities. Because once you can predict the solstice, you can predict planting season. Once you can predict planting season, you can build a civilization. Time, in other words, was the hidden raw material under every empire that ever rose. But notice what happened along the way. The more precise our tools got, the less we used our bodies. The shadow stick replaced the felt sense of midday. The water clock replaced the rhythm of hunger. The mechanical clock invented in medieval Europe replaced the sky, and the smartphone replaced just about everything else. We gained accuracy. We lost intimacy. Your ancestors knew the time the way you know the smell of your own home, without thinking, without checking, without effort. You know the time the way you know a stranger, by looking at a label. Neither way is wrong, but one of them is much, much older. So the next time you glance at your phone and see it's 7,042 p.m., try something. Look up. Look at the color of the sky. Notice where the sun sits on the horizon or where the moon is hanging. Feel the temperature against your skin. That information, that exact bundle of sensory data, is what your ancestors used to navigate entire lifetimes. Their clocks weren't worse than yours. They were just woven into the world instead of strapped to a wrist. And somewhere deep in your biology, that older clock is still ticking. Tonight, when the lake starts to fade, your eyes will quietly begin producing melatonin, on a schedule older than every civilization combined. You won't notice it, but your body will be running the same ancient software your ancestors used to know when to come home. If this kind of story is your thing, the strange, hidden ways our ancestors actually lived, Hit that subscribe button and join us on Hominin because we're just getting started. Drop a like if you've ever felt that weird pull to look up at the stars without knowing why. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing modern life has made you forget how to feel? Next time, we're diving into something even stranger, how ancient humans found their way across entire continents without a single map. Until then, keep looking up. Your ancestors did.